It's 11:23. You're with Britain's News on GBNews with Andrew Riz and Bev Turner at the Tory conference. And we've got Liam Halligan here, barracking me from the sidelines here. And we're also joined by the former, very briefly, what was your role in this trust?
I was Environment Secretary then, but Trade Minister before.
Trade Minister before, Ranald Joe. And we're going to talk to you first of all, Liam, about food prices. Good news.
It's worth saying this isn't a story from the Labour Party conference here in Manchester. It's a broader story.
Yeah.
Now, we know...
Did you just say the Labour Party here in conference?
Sorry, the Tory Party.
Well done, I'm glad you clarified.
There you are.
I absolutely...
That's next week.
No, I did. I actually went to bed early.
Right, who is? OK.
Stop
Andrew, this is a family show. Come on. This isn't a story from party conference. This is a story about inflation. British Retail Consortium have come up with these food price inflation numbers. Now, we know that inflation fell last month from July to August.
Unexpectedly.
Headline inflation from 6.8 to 6.7%. That was ONS numbers, official numbers. But within that, food price inflation, annual food price inflation, was up at 13 to 14%. Huge food price inflation still. Now, the headlines from the British Retail Consortium this morning tell us that food price inflation has fallen. But let me explain.
It's the first time in 2 years.
Yes, but it's fallen month on month.
Right.
It fell in September compared to August by 0.1%.
Well, not much then.
A move in the right direction. But on an annual basis, September compared to last September, food prices, according to the British Retail Consortium, are still 9.9% more expensive.
Wow. It's very
so
high.
all the headlines of food price inflation is down. I'm here to explain to you the reality. Month-on-month food price inflation is down, but year-on-year food price inflation is still almost in double digits.
Which is too high.
Which is far too high. Now, the British Retail Consortium, they would say this, wouldn't they? Oh, there's huge competition between supermarkets. And I'm sure there is some competition between supermarkets. But I must say, as a whole, the food retailing sector is still charging too much, given if you look at what's happened to global food prices on wholesale markets, which are down sharply.
Well, let's bring Ranald here, because you were yesterday at Liz Truss's big speech. You were a supporter of Liz Truss. You backed her leadership. You were in her cabinet. She's talking about cutting corporation tax. Food inflation is still far too high, 10% annual.
Yeah, 9.9. Yeah.
Is this why this government has got to cut taxes and soon?
Well, I think cutting taxes not only feeds through to consumer prices, but actually helps businesses grow in the first place.
Right.
And, we need to create jobs, we need to create the wealth for this country, and we only do that by enabling businesses to thrive. And it's not just corporation tax. The Conservative Growth Group that I chair, we're calling for the reversal of the IR35 rules that made it really hard for small businesses.
Davis was talking about that. That really hits small businesses.
Absolutely right.
Admin, accountants' fees, really hurts.
And the VAT registration threshold as well. So many businesses stop at 85k because they know they'll have to charge 20% extra if they go a penny over. It's insane. We've left the EU now. We don't have to follow their rules, and we should seize the opportunity.
Small businesses.
Absolutely, and I think we still are. I think we still are. The people here, the response yesterday, people queuing out the door, 200 people had to be turned away, sadly. The people here are still very supportive of these small business policies, and indeed cutting taxes for people too.
Are they still supportive of her, Liz Truss?
I think there is absolutely a desire, excuse me, for the agenda to cut taxes.
It's a very diplomatic answer.
Her speech went down very well. She was good.
I was at the meeting because I was chairing the meeting. So I introduced Liz Truss, I introduced Ranald, I introduced Jacob Rees-Mogg, I introduced Priti Patel. And I must say, I've been doing this stuff quite a long time, going to Parliament, political fringe meetings, at all the party conferences over many years. And what we saw yesterday was a good old-fashioned Parliament fringe meeting that challenged the party consensus. It was 1 hour before the Chancellor stood up. It was massively well attended.
Absolutely.
It drove all the headlines yesterday, and it was my job to be there and chair and compare and be a journalist, which is what I was. But I must say, I haven't seen Liz Truss speak as well as she did yesterday, ever. There was none of the woodenness. I think she's been
under the same pressure.
I think
she's
been freed up because she no longer is shouldering the tyranny of the ambition of wanting to lead her party and lead her country.
And she looks like
she's beyond that.
She responded to the love in the room, right? She's only human, and she took such a bashing when she was PM and immediately afterwards. And now there was so much support for her that she really stepped into it. And I think she was talking without notes, wasn't she?
She was talking without notes, and some a really interesting piece of politics happened, if I may say so, Ranul, and it happened when you, in your speech, did an aside to me.
Yes.
Because in my introductory remarks, this is important. In my introductory remarks, I said that these four members, these four former cabinet ministers, all of them, and one a former Prime Minister, they were all part of this grouping on the Conservative backbenchers, the Conservative Growth Group, of which, of course, Ranul is the leader. And I said, as hopefully an informed journalist, you know, there are upwards of 50 members. That's quite a lot of the parliamentary party.
Yeah.
And Ranul, in an aside, said to me, actually, Liam, jokingly, he said, I think you'll find we're nearer 60.
We're growing.
So the next time I got on the stage to introduce the next speaker, I said, isn't this interesting? Because of that Conservative Growth Group, a big chunk of them has said they will not vote for any government legislation that puts taxes up.
Including Priti Patel.
Including Priti Patel. So if there's, including Liz Truss, so if there is a budget statement, an autumn statement, or a budget next year, and the OBR says this puts up the total amount of GDP that's taken by tax, a huge chunk of the parliamentary party, the government's own MPs, won't vote for it, right? And the number of them is about the same size, 60, as the government's current working majority.
Yeah.
If the government can't get its budget bill through, that's a no confidence.
Can you tell us who the new names are who've come forward? It's in the interest of openness and transparency. Any names that we would know?
No, we don't reveal our names. We're not like one of the research groups and so on. Well, it's for members themselves to set out whether they support our agenda. They're MPs.
Some former ministers?
Absolutely. In fact, there are also additional folks who are even serving ministers who agree with what we're talking about. You know, there you are. There's a break for you right now. I couldn't possibly comment. More.
He's enjoying this.
But
But
the
are
point,
they officially members, or are they?
No, they're supporters. They're supporters.
A dozen?
No, not quite as many as that in the ministerial cadre. No, we don't have a WhatsApp group. That, again, to protect people's,
then they can do screenshots,
people's names. That's right. That's right.
People like me would then get hold of the WhatsApp.
Undoubtedly, being a great journalist.
Steal his phone.
The point is, this just shows that the economic growth agenda hasn't gone away. In fact, it's absolutely crucial for this country. And we've been living in this sort of, in the whole of the Western world, this sort of social democratic model for the last 25 years. No one's wanted to break out of it. And whilst they stopped Liz trying to do that, and whilst Liz has admitted herself she could have done things in a different way, I think the ideas at the heart of it need to be explored still.
Just very briefly, those ministers who come to indicate their support for the commission, is that this week or in the last couple of weeks?
Over the last few months.
Right.
And what you're saying, just how is it, I'm just trying to relate how this is relevant to our audience at home. What you're saying, Liam, is if this group has such momentum that they could genuinely scupper budgetary ambitions.
They could stop the government
before the election.
If a government cannot get its budget bill through, or see, every time there's an autumn statement or a budget, there's a piece of legislation called a finance bill, right, that then has to go through Parliament to enact everything.
That would bring the government down. If
that will bring the government down, because.
Would you want to do that?
No.
They can threaten. They can threaten.
That's certainly not our intention. We actually focus on trying to work with the government to push them to do the right thing. So they scrap the lifetime allowance, for example, to help doctors stay in public service. Absolutely. So we got that win. They're listening on inheritance tax, which is a terrible death tax that we need to get rid of in this country and costs a fraction of the Treasury's revenue.
And that, Ranul, is, if I may say so, for the benefit of our viewers and listeners, that is a very well-spoken but a very clear threat. That is what is.
I don't threaten people.
What I mean is, if there are, and I'm not saying that there aren't, if there are upwards of 60 members of this Conservative Growth Group, and the government's working majority is 60, which it is once you take out Sinn Féin and the parliamentary tellers and the Speaker and all the rest of it, then these guys could threaten to stop the budget bill.
And I have to stop our conversation dead as well. Gentlemen, lovely to see you. Thank you so much. Really, really interesting.
Not denying it.